Hello, everybody. Welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to go through planetary transits, or Gochara as they're known as in Sanskrit, for the month of March 2024. And this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so keep that in mind. And it seems like the theme for the month is embracing the unusual and unexpected. All right, so grab your tea and our favorite beverage, and let's talk astrology here. Okay, a note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Okay, if you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are on my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject, so you can learn more about it if you're not familiar with that concept or term. So, this is an interpretation video for the most part, and so I'm going to be incorporating a lot of different concepts. And so there's a lot of different videos that may be helpful to you, especially if you're a beginner. So there's north, south, and east Indian style charts. I also include Western charts in the video, but not in the title. So, introduction to navigating a birth chart, the lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, first house. Introduction to the constellations or rashis, constellation or rashi categories, planetary aspects, directional strength or digbala, natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas, planet friends and enemies, graha, mitra, shatru, planetary war or graha, yuddha, planetary combustion or asta, planetary exaltation and debilitation, nicha, bhanga, bhavat, bhavam, nakshatras or lunar mansions, lunar and solar eclipses. This is probably sort of the big ticket item for the month because we have an eclipse coming up at the end of the month. So everything you want to know about eclipses in terms of what it is astronomically, as well as the general kind of ideas and concepts around it from a Vedic astrology perspective, are in that video. I'm not going to get into it in depth here, although I do every month in-depth videos on the new and full moons. And so, since that's essentially what a lunar and solar eclipse involves, then I will be doing a specific video on the eclipse at the end of the month, but I'm only going to touch on it briefly here. So if you want to learn more, you can check out that video for background on lunar and solar eclipses, not this particular one coming up. Also, I have a whole playlist on each planet or graha. So if you want to learn more about the symbolism of any of the planets, classic Jyotish planets, all the videos are up. Especially since we are going to be talking a lot about Rahu and Ketu this month, which are the planets that form lunar and solar eclipses. You might particularly check out that video. I also have a growing playlist on each house or bhava and the symbolism. And so, especially when you see some of the charts I'm going to go through, there's a lot of concentrated energy. And so, especially knowing the house meaning or bhava meaning is going to be important. And then I have a growing list of yogas or planetary combinations. And so, I'll be touching on a few of those like Kala Sarpa, Pravraja, and Gaja Kesari. So, a lot to learn, all for you. Okay, so let's first I go through the dates just so you have a calendar for the month in terms of what's moving when and where. The first of the month, Mercury moves into Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra, and Venus moves into Dhanashta. So, yeah, that just happened. And then March 4th, Sun moved into Purva Bhadrapada as well, and Ketu moved to Hasta Nakshatra. So that's actually a fairly big deal because Ketu is a slow mover. We'll talk about that. And then March 6th, Mercury will be moving to Pisces or Mina, and Mars will be moving into Dhanishta, and Ketu will be aspecting Mars. This, I think, is actually going to be a fairly big deal, but I'll get into it more. Again, it's not the lunar eclipse at the end of the month, but it's almost a foreshadowing, I think. Then Mars 7th, Venus moves into Aquarius or Kumbha. Mars 8th, Mercury moves into Uttara Bhadrapada. Mars 10th, there's going to be a new moon in Purva Bhadrapada. So you can see there's going to be a lot of movement in the Bhadrapada nakshatras, Purva and Uttara. And the new moon's going to be in the Purva Bhadrapada part that's in Aquarius, not Pisces. March 12th, Venus moves into Shatabisha. nakshatra. March 14th, Sun moves into Pisces. March 15th, Mercury moves into Revati, and Mars will move into Aquarius. March 16th, Saturn leaves combustion or asta. That's fairly important. So you might have felt like there was a little bit more movement the last few weeks while Saturn was combust, at least external movement, maybe not internal movement, but we'll talk about that. And then March 17th, Sun moves into Uttar Bhadrapada. March 19th, Mercury crosses Rahu. The 20th through the 22nd of March, there's going to be a planetary war in Graha Yuddha between Venus and Saturn. March 23rd, Venus moves into Purva Bhadrapada. Mars moves into Shatubisha, and then there's going to be a direct aspect on Ketu by Mars. So this is also fairly inflammatory. So Ketu is going to aspect Mars at the beginning of the month on March 6th, and then Mars is going to aspect Ketu the 23rd to 25th of March. And that's right when the lunar eclipse is happening. So fairly explosive energy, looks like. 25th of March, there's a lunar eclipse in Virgo or Kanya, and that's going to be in Hasta Nakshatra. And that same day, Mercury moves into Aries or Mesha Rashi, constellation, and Ashwini Nakshatra at the same time, since those are aligned. And then March 30th, Sun moves into Revati Nakshatra. March 31st, Venus moves into Pisces, which should help sort of with collateral damage, hopefully. And then April 1st, just because it's the beginning of the month, I wanted to mention Mercury is going to go retrograde or vakri. Okay, so these are the important dates for March. If you're looking, again, this video is just for the month of March, pretty much. And so if you're looking for a whole year 2024 analysis, I would check out my winter solstice Uttarayana 2023 video if you're looking for the whole year. But let's get into these energies and see what's going on. Okay, so this is how the sky pattern is shifting. So on the left, this is March 1st, a couple days ago, and the lugna, the rising sign first house, I've set for Aries or Mesha, so that it lines. So basically, this creates the natural zodiac. So the natural zodiac, if you're not familiar, is when you take the first constellation of the zodiac, which is Aries, Mesha, and you put it in the first house. And this is essentially what creates a horoscope for the whole world. Okay, so this is March 1st on the left, and then we have March 31st on the right. Okay, so let's look at the March 1st chart first. So you can see what's going on here. Well, the moon is in the nakshatra of Vishaka. So Vishaka is all about winning, but winning at all costs. So, um, I think that's fairly significant. It's fairly aggressive energy with the mind of starting the month. And there's a Dasha period at this moment in time. And if you're interested, the exact time was 8:11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for me to line up this Aries in the first degree. But that's not really that relevant. Then the Dasha period at this moment in time is Jupiter, Saturn, Moon. So this moon, is fairly significant. So somebody who's looking to, win and compete and dominate essentially. So what else do we have here? We have Jupiter up in the Aries here. So Jupiter is bala. That's directional strength. That's going to make Jupiter strong. We do, and again, we have a Jupiter, Saturn, Moon Dasha going on. So Jupiter's important, Moon's important, and then also Saturn. So Saturn is over in the 11th house, Swa means it's in its own sign here of Aquarius, and Saturn is aspecting onto Jupiter. Okay, Saturn is the great malefic and Jupiter's the great benefic. And so Saturn, this massive Saturn is going to be dragging on the, sort of Christmas Santa Claus-like energy that Jupiter tends to represent and manifest. Okay, so the other thing to note, again, on this March 1st chart here, is that look, you've got Mars and Venus and Capricorn, which are ruled by Saturn. You've got Saturn, Sun, Mercury, all sitting in Aquarius, excuse me, which is, again, ruled by Saturn. And then Saturn is aspecting Jupiter. So you've got 5 signs in Saturnian signs and another one aspected by Saturn. So 6 out of 9 grahas are under the influence of a very strong Saturn. Okay, and again, Saturn, if you're not familiar, just very briefly, Saturn is all about delays and obstacles. And most of the month, I think, if I remember, it's going to be in Shatabisha. I think next month it shifts into Purva Bhadrapada. Either way, Shatabisha is a nakshatra that translates as 100 healers. So we could be looking at potentially things that are very difficult to heal, diagnose and heal. Whether it's mental, emotional, or physical kind of illness or strife. Yeah. Um, then we do have a Pravraja Yoga up here in the 11th house. We have Mercury, Sun, Saturn, those three planets. Pravraja Yoga is essentially a yoga planetary combination that signifies a life focus. So the 11th house, main things that the 11th house signifies are things like income as well as groups, clubs, and societies. And so I think at this moment in time, yeah, you can see Sun and Mercury just past Saturn. So they got kind of walloped by Saturn in the last week or so. And they're kind of coming out of that fray. And then they're soon, in the next week or two, Mercury's going to leave that sign, and then Sun's going to leave that sign into Jupiterian sign, into a Jupiterian sign of Pisces. So that's going to be a fairly big shift. But yeah, Mercury, Sun, Saturn, medically, Mercury represents the peripheral nerves, Sun represents the central nervous system, and Saturn represents the neuromuscular junction. So literally, and Sun represents general health, and Mercury represents like, uh, even like the mind, thoughts, rationality, logic, stuff like. So you might have actually, like the last couple of weeks or so, really been feeling almost paralyzed, like not knowing what to do, like maybe literally not feeling like you want to move or go anywhere because it's just all, Mercury and Sun are just, swimming in this Saturnian pond here. Um, so the focus here, the 11th house, clubs, group, society, income, typically. Um, and then we also have a Kala Sarpa-like pattern. So that's when all the planets are on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis, which you can see Rahu and Ketu are in the 612 axis here. I have that dotted kind of dark gray line. So only Jupiter's on one side. I would still take it because it's only one planet, and Jupiter's a slow-moving planet. Uh, so Kalasarpa represents ambition. Okay, and Rahu is in the 12th house here, so that could be like ambition overseas, for example. It could also be spiritual ambition, for example. Then this chart also has a Richika Yoga. The Richika Yoga is formed by Rahu and Capricorn because Mars is exalted in Capricorn. And Mars is, especially since Mars is the Lugnatia for the natural zodiac, that's important because Mars has gone to the 10th house of career and also fame. And Mars is going gangbusters. Here being very practical, being very industrious, and to some extent overshadowing this Venus that it just got out of a planetary war with. So not only was Mercury and Saturn in planetary war recently, but so was Venus and Mars. So there's a lot of this Mars domination as well as Saturn domination, and those are they're neither one's really a warm and fuzzy planet typically. It depends. Mars can be fuzzy or warmer because it is a hot planet than Saturn, but Mars in Capricorn, it's all about getting things done in a practical way in the practical world. Seeing things happen, manifesting things, seeing tangible results. And Venus is here, so there's some passion. Venus and Mars together is passion, but this could even like if this is some signifying relationship for somebody, this is like trying to get some traction in terms of practical, getting logistics together. So that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I mean it's and then this Mars here is actually aspecting back into the Lugna, so it brings strength to the whole chart. And so there's this kind of, if we're following Mars in terms of what the whole chart is doing, it's almost like if this was a person, this is somebody who's like really working their tail off, at work, building up their public image and that sort of thing. building up themselves. It's like transforming self, public image, relationships type stuff, and like, just winning. Because again, we have this moon in Vishaka. So there's not a lot of, Jupiter's doing what it can, but again, it's under the influence of Saturn and it's also under the influence of Mars. So this Jupiter is getting a little bit enveloped with this kind of overproductive energy because again, with you when you have Saturn and Mars together in the same house, that can indicate something like workaholism, athletes, people who just are, total go-getters, but sometimes at the detriment to themselves and others. Um, and engineers. So this is like, again, not the most emotional type of energy here. The only planet that's an emotional house is Rahu here, which it looks like, it might be that, the only sort of emotional time, is just, taking some time off to retreat, and regroup or something like that so you can jump back into the fray. The thing that was that, we do have since the Dasha period is Jupiter and Moon, double moon here. There is something about there's this tension. What I see here is a tension between the first house of self and the seventh house of relationships and like business partnerships and things like that. So the seventh house lord is this Venus that's under this, influence of this massive Mars. So it could be somebody who's like just going gangbusters at business or even trying to kind of, I guess it sounds kind of funny, like manufacture a relationship. Like it might be somebody who's like, how do I say? Like maybe they're reading a bunch of articles on relationships and trying to get tips on relationships and then like trying to apply what they've read. But it's like a little bit it could be like a little bit awkward or like a little bit cliche. Um uh because again, it's not coming like from an intuitive or kind of heart-based place, even if it's well intended. Um it might just be like, oh, I read this in a book, so let me try it. Which is fine, but it may not pull on somebody's heartstrings in quite the same way as something more, intimate or personal. Yeah. Anyway, so that's just sort of the general energy at the beginning of the month. And again, we're talking about the whole world here, so everybody's sort of like trying to get things done. Looks like. Then, if we move to March 31st here, then you can see, we're shifting a bit, quite a bit actually. So now, not only do we still have Jupiter and Aries, but now we've got Mercury. And Mercury and Jupiter both have bala in the first house. And the thing is, Mercury is represents the student, and Jupiter represents the teacher. Mercury and Jupiter are both planets representing education. They're both also planets representing speech and writing, and the media, especially when they get together. So they both have strength here. And you can see that the Dasha period here is Mercury, Jupiter, Mercury, Mercury. So there's a lot of learning to be had, speech, writing, media. This is all about communication, and a lot of communication, fiery communication, even because this is an Aries. It's a fiery, it's ruled by Mars, a fiery planet. Okay. So, I think it's going to be pretty sharp focus or shift between the beginning of the month and the end of the month in terms of getting practical stuff done versus like talking and educating and informing. What else do we have here? So the other thing is that Moon. So the Moon's position is a little bit different now. So Moon before was a little bit more on the offense because Moon was in Vishaka, winning at all costs. Even when there's damage to self and others, and it's pretty aggressive. Then we're moving to Jesta. Jesta is like a more of a protective energy. So now we're going from offense in the beginning to defense, at the end here. The other thing is that Moon and Scorpio is debilitated. So, and Moon represents things like, women, but also the mind, emotions, and public. So there might be something going on publicly that there's a lot of like news happening at the end of the line. What else here? So if the first chart, is very Saturnian dominated, Saturn dominated, the second chart is becoming more Jupiter dominated because now Mercury's with Jupiter, although they're both under the influence of Saturn. But now you can see Sun and Rahu are in, Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. So, and then you'll see like Venus is right, it's like a minute away from shifting into, Pisces here at the end of the month. So at least at that same day, I think Venus shifts, right? So, yeah, so Venus is going to be there. It's going to be strong. Venus is also a benefit planet. That's going to be fairly nice. Um, but it's sort of like now when you have Rahu and Sun together in the 12th house here, now we've got even more energy and focus and leadership on the international front. So again, I think this is a, preview sort of what I think is probably going to manifest this month. But international governments are involved here. And let's see. Luckily with Venus shifting into Pisces, I think that's going to bring some benevolence here. Maybe not initially, because when Venus crosses this line between Aquarius and Pisces, it's in Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada is a fairly aggressive, destructive nakshatra, lunar mansion. The deity associated with Purva Bhadrapada is one of the forms of Rudra, which is a storm god. So, we could literally be talking, especially because we have Saturn and Mars here, in Aquarius. Um, Saturn and Mars are Bhumi Karakas. Bhumi is land, property, and Karaka is a symbol, so they both symbolize property. But it's an Aquarius, so it could be that there is like this could be like a cyber attack, you know. Kind of thing. But the other thing is that we have Mars aspecting onto K2. Uh, most exactly. Am I getting that right? Yeah, Mars is at least aspecting into the same house as K2. And the thing is, that's fairly harsh energy there. Because K2 is an explosive planet. It's kind of like Mars, but with an extra twist of hiddenness and unexpected, sort of bizarre type action. You never quite know what you're going to get with Rahu or K2. And then you have Mars in the same house. Mars is a planet that symbolizes enemies, and the sixth house, where K2 is the natural house for enemies. So that's, I think, going to be problematic. Um, Yeah. So, and Virgo, which rules the sixth house in the natural zodiac, is it's a dual earth sign. So it's a very practical, tangible, sort of focused type of house. And so there can be, I think, practical things here, especially again, this Mars K2 thing going on here that they kind of rub up against each other a few times during the month. That's a fairly explosive energy, and that's the kind of energy that we had back in October when Israel got bombed by Hamas. So, and I know that I think they're in what maybe ceasefire talks now. I'm not really sure how that's going to go. So yeah, so let me just get back to my notes here so I don't totally lose my focus. So again, we've got a Pravraja Yoga again in the 11th house, but now it's a little bit different. So instead of Mercury, Sun, Saturn, now we've got Venus, Mars, Saturn, and all three of these planets are actually passion combinations. So now there's a lot of harnessing public support is what I see here. Whereas before there was sort of like theoretical type of stuff. And the thing is, because it's an Aquarius, what you're trying to do is not just sort of gather people together physically, but you're trying to gather people's minds and energies and philosophies together and engineer things that way to, again, disseminate information or teach or something like that. Yeah, so I think that's most of it. Let me just double check, step back to reflect. Yeah, I mean, again, this Rahu is Sun in the 12th house. That can be, the Sun represents just general vitality. So going to the 12th house, that could be on a personal level, like just trying to retreat because there's just so much going on. Um, it could be potentially stepping into, more of a spiritual nature, learning more about spirituality, because the 12th house can also represent, besides international, destinations, like places of isolation, and sun can represent temples. So it might be, you know, people in general are really leaning on their spirituality or religious traditions, because again, Jupiter, because there's all this learning and stuff going, in the first house here, and Jupiter is the lord of the ninth house of religion. Yeah. Uh, yeah. And then again, with Mercury and Jupiter in the first house, it's all about public image and self and identity. Um, but again, how much public support is there? Because again, you can see with these three planets, Venus, Saturn, and Mars in the 11th house, Venus, mid month here is going to cross Saturn. Usually when planets cross Saturn, that's not usually a, you know, happy time. That's a pretty harsh thing. And then you can see Mars was just about to cross Saturn. So, again, that's like grinding the wheels, really. Okay, so yeah, that's how things generally shifting through the month. Well, let's talk about individual planets here. So we're talking about Mercury first, Buddha in Sanskrit. So Mercury represents things like communication, education, logic, analysis, travel, business, that sort of thing, friends. So March 1st, Mercury moved into Purva Bhadrapada. Again, Purva Bhadrapada, the symbol for that is the front legs of a funeral pyre. Again, that's fairly intense nakshatra, fairly destructive nakshatra. So with Mercury moving into Purva Bhadrapada, it's almost like, yeah, like a loss of ideas or a loss of thoughts or thought processes, that sort of thing, like a definite shift in the thoughts that sort of structure our decision making. Yeah. Purvadropada begins in Aquarius, which is a neutral sign for Mercury. And at that time, Mercury's going to conjoin, the Swa Combus Saturn as well as Sun. The other thing about Purvadropada is sometimes it's symbolized by a two-faced person. And so because Mercury represents a friend or colleague, typically like a business colleague, um, this could be like somebody falling out with a friend or a business associate. But the thing is, it wouldn't necessarily be something that was obvious. Um, it might be like more of an implosion because Saturn and Mercury are both combust when Mercury moved into Purva Bhadrapada. So it might just be like, you just don't get a call from that person or something. Instead of them like blowing up in your face, they might just, implode and just slink away. March 6th, Mercury moves into Pisces or Mina, which, Mercury's debilitated in Pisces. And that's going to be a shift. I mean, at least Mercury, when it was in Aquarius, that was a neutral sign for Mercury. But and planets don't do badly in any Jupiterian sign. But Mercury is debilitated in Pisces. So since Pisces is a dual water sign, this is going to be trying to think straight, trying to be logical during sort of an ocean of emotion, kind of the way I think about it. Okay, and then there's going to be Rahu there, so there's going to be even more of like this, unknown energy or twist and turn energy, emotional, but it's going to be emotional in nature. And then the other thing is once Mercury moves into Pisces, then K2 is going to aspect 5 and 9 houses away. So you're going to get more of this K2 energy, in 3 of the 12 problems of the chart. And again, K2 is a very fairly explosive, planet. So, yeah, so there's going to be, difficulty maybe trying to process emotions or trying to decide things when you're swimming in emotions. There could be a certain amount of like endings and uncertainty. Well, the uncertainty comes from Rahu, but the endings could be just because this is the 12th sign. I mean, there's a general energy of endings and completing cycles with Pisces. Although Mercury is going to move through Pisces through the month and then slip into Aries and then be there for about 10 days before it goes retrograde at the end of the month. So this is just Mercury's first pass in Pisces. So So there can be quite a bit of confusion, especially because the eclipses are going to be happening. The eclipse at the end of the month is going to be happening, inclusive of Pisces. So it's not going to be a straight, efficient path forward as much as you'd like it to be. 8th of March, Mercury moves into Uttara Bhadrapada. That's going to be a slight shift up because Uttara Bhadrapada is not nearly as uh, forceful and destructive as Purva Bhadrapada. There is this kind of shifting into, it's still a transformative energy because the symbol here is the back legs of a funeral pyre. So it's kind of like more about releasing the soul, releasing releasing past hurt, releasing past destruction, past losses, that sort of thing. Um, and finding like or creating meaning from losses. That's what I was saying here. Kind of get wrapping your mind around something that blew up that you were attached to, and then just like, okay, well, how can I make the most of the situation, or trying to anyway. March 15th, Mercury moves into Revati. Revati is a gentler nakshatra, so that's nice. And it's, about hospitality and travel and time. So again, I think when Mercury moves into Revati, there's going to be this general energy of like releasing and trying to move into more peaceful cycles, new cycles, like learning what you can from whatever fell apart and then moving into better territory mentally. 19th of March, Mercury crosses Rahu. Well, who knows? Because Rahu and Ketu are the wild cards of the Jyotish deck. So, um, Rahu, though, is ambitious and spiritual, and Mercury's there. So, it could be some kind of unexpected internal change regarding work, purpose, authority, father, because the sun is also going to be in Pisces at that time. So, and those are the things that sun represents. Um, 25th of March, yeah, this is where we get, it really starts heating up. Mercury moves to Aries Mesha, in Ashwini Nakshatra. So then the mind is going to, and maybe travel and communication is going to spark up temporarily for about 9 or 10 days before Mercury's back in Pisces. So it might be like, one step forward, two steps back kind of a feeling. So there might be like an attempt to get some traction and move forward, but it looks like because Mercury is retrograding back into Pisces, is going to kind of get sucked back into a second wind of this emotional thing that might have felt complete, but maybe isn't completely done. Aries is a neutral sign for Mercury, and at that time, Jupiter will be there. So the two education planets again will be in Aries. So again, a lot of initiatives with education and learning and speaking and media. Um, so it will feel like temporarily again, like there's this kind of expansion after release. Whatever kind of dwindled or shifted or whatever, and we kind of are stepping away from that. It's almost like this. What I was kind of feeling was like whatever was released. It's like that phrase. Energy is neither created nor destroyed; it's just transformed. And so it's sort of like when you create that void with whatever was released, something will manifest again. It's like the other phrase, nature abhors a vacuum. The space will be filled, and so, yeah. But again, however, April 1st, Mercury goes retrograde. So it's going to be a short lived story before Mercury heads back to Pisces. At least when Mercury goes back into Pisces a second time, Venus will be there. So at least that'll create a nicha bhanga for Mercury. So that'll ameliorate some of the debilitation effects of Mercury when we do the redo. And because Venus is going to be in Pisces, Pisces is an emotional constellation or Rashi, and Venus is an emotional planet. I think it's going to be more about having a little bit more wisdom and compassion mentally in terms of communication, decisions, and media and stuff like that. And also like trusting your gut, your feelings, rather than just relying entirely on logic. Okay, so that's then we have Venus, Shukra, and Mars, Mangal. March 1st, Venus moved into Dhanishta. So Dhanishta is symbolized by a drum. So with Venus there, the planet mostly representing the arts. This could be, good rhythm with practical matters because Dhanishta is in a practical sign of Capricorn, but also like, work because it's also wrapped up with that massive exalted Mars, remember? So it's going to be very industrious, but also things like music and dance. So you might, I don't know, somebody might be signing up for a dance class or music class or something, or starting a new learning a new instrument or taking singing lessons or something like that. March 6th, Mars moves into Dhanishta. So again, more rhythm. And there's going to be an exact aspect between K2 and Mars. So, um, let me just double check on something really quick. Okay, I couldn't check on anything because I'm kind of sucked into the flow of PowerPoint, so I couldn't go check on something. But I just want to double check something with the degrees with K2 and Mars. But um, so even though Mars is creating practical physical movement here in Dhanishta, when you have this aspect by K2, um, that's pretty tough because you're going to have a disruption. What that means is you're going to have a disruption of rhythms. And because this is happening in Capricorn, disruption of physical rhythms and things like that. Like it could even, because Mars represents, again, land and property, this could be like a physical explosion. This could be like an earthquake type of thing, unfortunately. And the other thing is that I believe the moon's going to be there. So it could, with moon, Venus, and Mars there with this aspect of K2, um, that could be really something happening in a very public way because the moon is involved there. Yeah, so hopefully nothing untoward happening. Hopefully I'm completely wrong, but this is a pretty harsh energy in practical, physical public spaces potentially. So again, explosive energy, material things. It could also be a land grab because by this time K2 is now in Hasta Nakshatra. Hasta Nakshatra is symbolized by hand, but it can be very grabby. So it can kind of go either way, where somebody's either trying to grab land, because that's what Mars represents. And again, we're in Capricorn, a very earthy sign. It could also be somebody like, releasing land, like pushing land, destroying land potentially. And that could be man made or it could be natural, like, it could be like a military invasion. It can also be like an earthquake. So yeah, hopefully not. I'd love to be wrong on that, but we'll see, right? Then March 7th, Mercury moves into Aquarius or Kumbha, so it's moving out of this practical situation here, more into, ideal land because Aquarius is a fixed air sign. So now Venus is moving into more theory than practicality. And because that massive Saturn is there and Shatapisha, and Venus represents things like diplomacy and compassion stuff, this could be a lot of strain, worries, and tension on finding ways to be diplomatic or be compassionate. Because again, if something is really going down on the 6th, then again, hopefully it's not. Um, tensions are going to be running high. Uh, Social tensions are going to be running high. Then March 12th, Venus moves into Shatabisha. So, that's also potentially difficult because Shatabi Shah is 100 healers. So it's like, again, how do we ameliorate any diplomacy issues potentially? And it's going to be something that's difficult to remedy. March 15th, Mars moves into Aquarius. So this could be like new action in this space, new action regarding old thoughts and paradigms. Going against the ingrained thoughts of how to do things, because Mars is a rebellious planet, and K2 even more so. K2 is even more of like You never know what you're going to get with K2. Mars, you can kind of guess a little bit. Although Mars is erratic as well. But both planets, Mars and K2, are potentially violent and explosive. So that's when you get, when you start getting them aspecting each other. It's usually, inflammatory for sure. Um, then on top of all that, there's March 22nd through 25th. There's a planetary war between Venus and Saturn. So it's just gonna bring more attention to the situation, whatever it is. And Venus is again, the soft, fuzzy heart energy, and Saturn's tradition and bureaucracy. So it's like you can see those two coming up against each other. Once Venus passes Saturn, things will start to, move to their next level. But, it's going to be a few days here of fairly intense stuff. And again, that March 25th is when the eclipse is happening. So yeah, then March 23rd, Venus moves into Purva Bhadrapada, again, that fairly destructive nakshatra. So this could be like kind of a release of a relationship or compassion, like just saying, you know what, no more, drawing a line in the sand. And then that same day, Mars is moving into Shatabisha, closer to Saturn. So there might be some attempt to fight the machine, fight the bureaucracy, fight the establishment. But I don't know how far that's going to go because Saturn's just, squatting, pretty tightly in its own sign in Aquarius. And then 23rd through 25th of March, Mars is going to have a direct aspect on K2. That's, with that eclipse going on. I could see this as being philosophical and material military retaliation to the initial thing that happened on March 6th. Because the March 6th situation is based more in like Virgo and Capricorns, which are both earth signs. So it's the Virgo explosion uh, or energy coming from Virgo heating up things in Capricorn. But now it's going the other direction. We're coming from Aquarius. So from more of a tactical, thought-based, strategy type thing, um, uh, coming back and retaliating for the initial situation at the beginning of the month. So it could be something like that, philosophical military retaliation. Um, and then March 31st, Venus moves into Pisces where it's exalted, which is, definitely going to be welcome because Venus, when it's strong, generally helpful, although it's going to be debilitated in Virgo. So that may mean that even though Virgo, there's swelling support of compassion diplomacy, it may only go so far in terms of whatever's originating from the Virgo situation. And again, Virgo is the natural constellation or Rashi for the sixth house of the natural zodiac, which is the house of enemies, the Shatru, right? Shatru house, Shatru bhava, so Shatru sthana. So, but at least Venus moving into Pisces, this might be the beginning of recovery of some kind of peace or diplomacy, one would hope. And then again, Mercury is going to come back into Pisces, early on in April. And so Mercury is going to be debilitated, but nicha bhanga. So again, if you don't know what nicha bhanga is, I have a whole video on that. But because you have the exalted planet in Pisces with the debilitated planet, it kind of saves to some degree the debilitated planet. All right, so all these, all this like trying to make sense of this ocean of emotion and stuff will be a little bit easier to do potentially after the eclipse, but then we got another eclipse coming, early on in April. So at least maybe some temporary reprieve. Okay, so if you've watched any of my monthly videos, I like to include charts of people who have a similar birth chart to the current sky pattern, so that it's kind of less theoretical and a little bit more embodied. The energies are a little bit more embodied in somebody's life. So you can see here I have the chart of Harry Houdini. The birth time given for him is 24th of March, 1874. He has a 4 o'clock a.m. birth time, and this is based on a biography. I put a question mark here because I don't know if this is an exact minute birth time. And he's born in Budapest, Hungary. So the Lagna Nakshatra may have been Shravana. If it was 4 o'clock, it was in Shravana, which is a nakshatra that indicates like storytelling, which I think was a big part of who he was. And the moon at this moment in time was in the nakshatra of Mrigashirsha. So you can see the moon is only about a degree away from Taurus. It was in Mrigashirsha the whole beginning of the day, but then mid-afternoon it shifts to Ardra, and then, mm, but most of the day it should have been in Gemini. So, yeah, probably Mrigashirsha if he was born in the morning, even before noon, which I think is important because I think the Mrigashirsha nakshatra can indicate things like seeking, but also somebody who's very good at sales and advertising, which, if you go through his chart, you'll see is a big thing for him. The day lord at this moment in time was the moon, and the hora lord or hour lord was Saturn, which you can see is Swa, very strong Saturn in Capricorn in the Lugna. So it creates a Shasha yoga, which is a Raj yoga of power. But the other thing is that it's bhavat bhavam. So I just did a video on that. But bhavat bhavam indicates like repetition. So since the first house lord has gone one house away, which is the first house, that means this is somebody who's going to be constantly reinventing themselves, which is pretty true for his career. The birth shot at this moment of time was Mars, Mercury, Rahu, Jupiter. So that's really, I think, important because Mars is, especially because it's an Ashwini, which is a leadership position, also very inflammatory. And Mars and Rahu together here in Aries, this is going to be somebody who's like going gangbusters. I mean, just like over the top, which is what he was, especially in his career. Somebody who's very ambitious, um, probably obsessed with what they do. And then we have Mercury and Jupiter, which you can see Mercury and Jupiter are on the 3-9 axis, and there's actually a parivartana between those two. And that I think is crucial for his chart because I think all the stunts and stuff he did, like the escape stunts and stuff he does, it was all about creating a story. So again, the Shravana energy, nakshatra, um, and then making it was like a media circus essentially. Like he kept doing all these outrageous things in outrageous conditions to drum up attention through the media. And not only did he was just sort of like a news junkie type person, like a publicity stunt. It isn't just like a physical stunt, but it was a publicity stunt essentially. Is what he was based on this chart. Um, But the other thing is that he was like a prolific author, which I had no idea about until I read his biography. But he's written like quite a few books, I think like a dozen books, and he wrote all these papers on all sorts of things like magic and escapism, and yeah, it was really wild. I had no idea he wrote all that stuff. But you could see with Mercury and Jupiter here, and Jupiter when you do the parivartana exchange of houses, Jupiter goes into its own sign in the third house of written communication. And then he's got Venus there, which is exalted. So again, like the light sky pattern coming up. Um, with the sun, and I believe Mercury and Venus were both combust at this time, so you can't see them physically. So his job was basically to generate all this like media publicity stuff. And the other thing that's, interesting to me was that like you do have this Saturn on the third house, aspecting on the third house. So that kind of brings his physicality and self into this writing. And also, Saturn is not only the lord of the first house, but the second house of oral communication. So it was essentially him expressing himself through written communication, through his body. And it must have been hard on his body because Saturn uh, in the lugna and on the third house. And also like hard on his hand, literally because of all this like struggling out of handcuffs and straitjackets and things that he did. Um, I'm sure he tore up his hands and wrists and arms and shoulders doing that. Um, but besides that, with Jupiter, Sun, Venus, and all this, Mercury, I'm not seeing like a huge sense of danger here. So I do think it was like there was a lot of allusion to what he did. I'm not sure he was in as much danger as he created the scene to make it look like. Yeah. So in any case, media and communications with this Mercury, Jupiter, and the birth of Shah was important. Um, and then the Dasha sequence is Mars, Rahu. So he ran Mars and Rahu, and that's his fourth house of happiness, but also home. So I believe his family left Europe when he was quite young and moved to, I think, well, Milwaukee first, and he bumped around. Um, and then Jupiter's when his career really took off, which you could understand because with the parivartana between Mercury and Jupiter, we're gonna have Jupiter over most of the chart here. Um, and then Saturn is when he, I think, really stepped into power. Like he was president of some sort of magic society or group or something. And usually the presidents only lasted like a year or two, and I think he was voted in like 9 consecutive times or something. So he was sort of like the king of magic and illusion, one of the highest paid vaudeville performers at that time. So yeah. But you can see also with his chart, you can see Saturn, Mars, Rahu, Ketu, and the Kendras, the four houses in the middle there, squares in the middle, diamonds in the middle. This is a lot of like construction energy, like a lot of like very technical things, like physically technical things, like nuts and bolts and locks and chains, and those are all the sort of accessories he used. But you can see, except for Saturn in the third house, it's very different energy. So anyway, so let's start at the top here, like I usually do. So the top is a lugna, first house ascendant, rising sign, all different names for the first same thing. We have Capricorn and Makara lugna, so it's a movable earth sign, somebody who's very active, but also very practical. So Chara Prithvi. Um, and again, you have this massive Saturn at the top. So it is aspected by Jupiter, which is an Uttara Falguni. So that is represented by a hammock as a nakshatra. So there's a lot of enjoyment and finer living thing. It's kind of finer living, but it's with a purpose. So there's some purpose here. So again, this is his, crafting stories through his antics. Um, and I could just see, again, he's crafting these stories to gain attention, media attention, and he's using physical means like his body, the Saturn in the first house law, and again, constantly reinventing himself with this bhavam energy as well. Um, and I mentioned the Rishika yoga, Shasha yoga. So he's got, a lot of power between the Shah he was born into and then the Shah he ended up dying in. He also has, besides those two, he has a Gajakesari yoga, because of the placement of Jupiter, Moon, and then he's got these benefics, Mercury and Venus on Jupiter. So that's going to bring in a lot of networking. He's going to know a lot of people. Um, and he's got Kala Sarpa yoga as well. I would take a Kala Sarpa here as well because he's only got Moon and Jupiter on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis. Um, so ambition as well. So he does have power, but I don't think he was power that was always respected or done through respectable means. Uh, but huge network. Um, um, and then also, besides the Saturn, Mars, Rahu, Ketu combination, the Kendras, besides things like manufacturing and very nuts and bolts, literally nuts and bolts is what he worked with. It can give kind of a foreign energy because Saturn, Rahu, Ketu are all planets that represent things that are foreign, and he was a foreigner to the United States. He was also, especially with Rahu and Ketu, though, it can give kind of a unusual or oddball energy, which he definitely was. I mean, not too many people did what he did or were famous for what he did. So you can see that as sort of a central energy for him because they're in the Kendras. Then if we move on, I've been talking about the third house, but if we look at it a little bit more, the third house lord is Jupiter. There's a parivartana between Mercury and Jupiter. So it's massively strong third house here. So again, the third house represents things like physically, the hands, shoulders, neck, uh, arms, hands, yeah, and written communication, siblings. He had a number of siblings. I think 6 or 7 siblings, which with all these planets in the third house, is somebody who's going to have a lot of siblings, and they're all, 2 of them passed away though, and that may be because like you do have combust planets here. So even though they're strong, they're combust. So he might have had siblings didn't live very long, which is true for him. And what else did we have here? Let me just read my notes. So Jupiter's going to be exalted there. There's a compass Venus and Revati. That's going to be international diplomacy, travel. There's going to be a retrograde compass debilitated nicha bhanga Mercury. So, like we're going to have pretty soon for us. And that's in Purva. So this is like debunking, ideas, like just ripping apart people's ideas of what they think is possible, which is part of like the um, intrigue with what he did. It was people were just like they just couldn't believe that he was doing what he was doing. Between the like funky costumes and just the being underwater and milk cans and undoing handcuffs. And I think at one point um, in Europe, what was the story? I think they made him because they didn't believe him. They thought he was like just I don't know. It wasn't true that he actually uncuffed himself. So he actually, I think he had to like do one of his acts, like get himself out of handcuffs or straitjacket. He was naked, and he had to do it in front of 300 police officers. So from like a 360 point of view, so that he was seen from every angle, like, literally, to make sure that he wasn't cheating at what he was trying to do or prove. Just really wild stuff. So. And then the sun is an Uttar Bhadrapada. And the sun is actually the eighth house lord. So, the eighth house is all about the occult, unusual things, hidden things. And it's actually, sun there is bhavat bhavam. So, that's going to be like one death defying act or after another, or um, one death defying, publicity stunt after another is what you could see it as. So when you put this all together, somebody who uses their body on stage for publicity. The reason why I put stage is because Venus is the lord of the fifth house, which is like the stage, kind of public performance, bhava house. Express themselves through hands and arms, yeah, through undoing the handcuffs and the straitjackets and all that. Master in written publicity, oh definitely. He was just a spin meister. Prolific author he was. Fun, entertainment, it was all for a good time. Some courage was involved. I mean, I'm sure that there is some, strain here, but I'm not seeing a lot in the third house. Maybe because the sun is the eighth house lord, maybe because Saturn is, there's a little bit here potentially, but not as much as you would think. There's a lot more fun and excitement here. Well, Mercury's in Purva. Maybe. I don't know. I might have to think about that somewhere. I mean, maybe. Maybe. We'll see. Um, but I don't know. It was all those like shining happy planets in the third house. I mean, it was like this. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was like this weird mix of like excitement, but like, is he gonna drop to his death or is he gonna drown in the milk can? Like this like weird teeter-tottering, of excitement and anticipation and dread, all of it kind of mixed together. But all for a good time, all for entertainment's sake. And then the thing is, like with this moon and Mrigashirsha, because again, the Mercury is the lord of the sixth house here. That the moon could be like emotions, because it's like amping people up, emotion, like, oh, what's going to happen with this guy? But that's what he's wanting. He was wanting to kind of amp up people's like adrenaline and stuff like that, of like, oh, what's going to happen to him? And uh, he was seeking publicity through that, and it's almost like the moon and Mrigashirsha, it's almost like the public seeking him out, like what do they call it, rubbernecking on the road, when there's an accident and people, instead of like just going by and like making room for the fire trucks and the police or whatever, they're like, they're rubbernecking, they're kind of craning to see like the disaster, that happened. It's kind of a weird phenomenon with people, but it happens, right? So that's what he was like sort of like banking on, essentially, was that kind of phenomenon. um And it did involve enemies. I mean, it was kind of funny because also all of these planets and the, Pisces here, that's a dual sign. And it was kind of funny. He gave himself the name Houdini based on his French magician idol or mentor. I think the last name of his mentor was Houdin, and he added the I. Because in Hungarian, I think if you add the I, it becomes it makes a relationship between the Houdin, like somebody belonging to Houdin or whatever. And then the thing is, he went the other way. At some point, he wrote a whole book on how his mentor was a fake. So it's kind of, he was kind of on both sides of it, even though he was creating illusion himself. Then towards the end of the year, end of his career, end of his life, he was mostly doing things where he was debunking like psychics and seances and things like, people who were doing things related to the psychic arts and stuff like that. So it's kind of funny that he was kind of playing both sides of the fence and making money off both sides. It was all there in his chart. Then the fourth house, Swa, massive Mars with Rahu, very industrious, obsessed person, and the fourth house also represents underground. So he developed this interest in kind of the occult and esoterica and stuff like that early on. He was doing magic tricks early on. And with this combination, you would also imagine his mother, especially, but his family line to be immigrants, ambitious, pioneers, all of it. Yeah. Then the fifth house, you have Jupiter um, aspecting there. So this just adds more to, because Venus is the lord of the fifth house, stage arts, a lot of stage arts, a lot of performances, essentially, which is true for him. The sixth house, I already mentioned, you have a debilitated bhanga, asta, Mercury, Lord. So he got in trouble for sure, but he banked on it. He made money off getting in trouble and getting into and out of trouble. And then the moon and Mrigashirsha. So this sort of like creating accidents so people would, to um, gain attention from people, the public. The seventh house, Lord is this moon. So again, publicity, public, and then it's aspected by Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So again, like, and Mars is debilitated here. That's going to be a very erratic Mars. Um, so again, it's like this physical, he was doing these innovative things in terms of physical, spent stunts, publicity things. That was his business, essentially. Um, Then the 10th house lord is his combust Venus. Oh yeah, and then so he's a combust Venus in the 10th house. K2 is in Swati, which is a very restless energy aspected by Mars and Saturn. So you've got three malefics on the 10th house of career with the combust lord This is not going to be a 9 to 5 worker guy. He might have tried it early on, but it was just, a little bit, dribs and drabs, if anything, because his 10th house is so beat up that, yeah. Then, uh, let's see. Well, the other thing with the 10th house is this all of this kind of wild, personal injury stuff, is what he's going to promote and make him famous. So it's like making money off of a car crash, personal car crash of himself is what this is. Then the 11th house, you've got Mars aspecting from its own sign in Aries to its own sign of Scorpio. That's going to be a lot of money coming in, and he made a lot of money, and also a lot of networking. So again, with him being president of so many, not just the one group that I remember, but quite a few. I mean, he was like the king, of all these Rajogas, Saturn, and Mars in their own signs and Kendras. I mean, that's a lot of power, but was he famous like Mother Teresa type famous? I mean, he was like a controversial character. Um, and the other thing is that since he started off in Mars, he was actually, motivated by money, from birth, with this kind of combination. So anyway, Houdini, and how again you can see the relationship here with some of the planets, and this Mars K2 energy line up here, a lot of explosive energy. I mean, he had explosive performances, and then Mercury, Sun, Venus going through Pisces, so you can see how that's all working for him. All right, then if we look at Sun or Surya in March, March 4th, Sun just moved into Purva Bhadrapada. That's Aquarius in the beginning. That's an enemy sign for Sun. So, not the happiest position, especially when it's with that SWA Saturn. So this could be something like the end of communication, business, government, father, ends of cycles with these sorts of things. It can also, on a larger scale, be something like sanctions or embargo. Um, and that might be what kind of sets off that March 6th K2 Mars lineup that's fairly explosive. Yeah. I mean, and again, Sun swimming in the sea of really strong Saturn and Shatapisha, which is difficult energy, and then Purva Bhadrapada. I mean, this could be, the end or definitely a hard shift for governments and authorities. March 14th, Sun moves into Pisces, which is a friend sign. So that's helpful to Sun. It's probably better than where it was in Aquarius with that massive Saturn. So we're going to be shifting from head to heart, and doing more feeling instead of thinking. March 17th, Sun moves into Uttar Bhadrapada. So again, releasing, kind of like Mercury, kind of following the lead of Mercury of like releasing that which no longer serves the soul. After some sort of, it might be a literal blow up here, some kind. 25th of March, the lunar eclipse in Virgo, Kanya. This is going to be a clearing of the emotional slates, is what I'm seeing. And maybe more than clearing, but, starting from ground zero, I think. Then March 30th, Sun moves into Revati. So again, the soul is attempting to move into new, more harmonious cycles with that kind of ending energy of the last nakshatra of the last constellation. So fairly intense, and just slowly starting to move out of it, potentially towards the end of the month, but then we've got another eclipse coming up not too far after this. Okay, so I have another chart for you. This is Michelangelo. And, you'll see again here, this is another Mars K2 combination chart. So explosions there for this guy as well, and we'll talk about how they're kind of different explosions. But Michelangelo was born March 6th, 1475 at 1:45 in the morning in Caprese, Michelangelo. They have a town called named after him, I guess, in Italy. I did take this as the exact birth time. I don't know if I should, but I think it works pretty well for him. So I just assumed it was true. It may not be the exact moment, but I think there's a lot of good information to come from it. So the Lugna Nakshatra is Mula. So that's already a fairly intense energy. The symbol of that is a bunch of roots tied together. So you can think of like depths and also transformative energy. The goddess associated with that nakshatra is Nriti, which is a form of Kali, which is the goddess of death. So that's a fairly intense nakshatra. um, and then the moon nakshatra is in Shatabisha, which we've been talking about. So again, emotional pain. Somebody who's been in a lot of emotional pain, which I think was part of his story, unfortunately, and part of what drove him career-wise, but also in his behavior. So the moon, yeah, we talked about that. Okay, the day lord is Sun, and the raw lord is Jupiter. Um, and then the birth to Shah was Rahu, Venus, Rahu, Ketu. So the Rahu Ketu bit, ambition, unusualness, and Venus artist. Yeah. Then there's a Shah sequence: Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, Venus, Sun. Well, right in the middle there, well, Rahu, ambition from the beginning, and you can see his Rahu is in the 10th house of career and fame. And then he has with that Mars and Sun aspecting that. So he's the two fire planets with Rahu. I mean, this is somebody who's going to be obsessed with work, just literally on fire, probably about work. Um, and the thing though is that the Saturn Mercury K2 combination in the middle of the Shah sequence, Saturn Mercury K2 are all kind of separatist, isolationist type energies. Um, so I think he was an unusual guy, but he was fairly detached and obsessed with his work, was I'm getting already without even, really looking at each of the houses, bhavas. The other thing to note, if you see how close the sun is to Ketu and moon is kind of winding up in there too, his birthday is only a couple weeks out from a lunar eclipse. So you can see the wind up here. And I think even though you don't get what is it? Like Rahu and Ketu aspects here. I mean, Mula Nakshatra is ruled by Ketu. And with the, lead up to a lunar eclipse, I think there's more Rahu Ketu energy in his chart than somebody might anticipate initially. So a pretty unusual guy. So his lugna is Sagittarius or Danu. It's a dual fire sign, Dosva Bhava Agni. So, what I was seeing from here, there aren't many other planets here, but already it's like, how do you manifest physical representation of thoughts, philosophy, on transformation, death, destruction? This is like, again, fairly intense. But when you're combining like, Sagittarius and the Mula energy, that's what you would get. The Lugnatia is Jupiter. Jupiter is debilitated, but it is shored up by Saturn, even though Saturn is Sunday in the first degree of Cancer. But Saturn aspecting into its own sign in second house, it's going to buff up this debilitated Jupiter. Um, what else? Jupiter is in Shravana, so we've got another storyteller here. Um, the Saturn that's aspecting is in Punarvasu, so that's somebody who has a home base and goes out and comes back home. From what I understand, he's a fairly hermit-like type guy, not particularly social, and actually, as we'll see in the chart also, um, kind of a loner, worked, kind of a, what was it, a melancholic type personality. Apparently, didn't really revel in all the money and stuff and goodies that came his way from being a famous artist of his time. And also, like, didn't really, ate simple food and lived simply and was, again, detached, I think, from the material things of the world, was driven by something deeper, I think. So what else? Oh, he also has the moon aspecting his second house because there's a parivartana between the sun, or sorry, Saturn and moon. But the thing is that Saturn on Mercury Saturn moon combination. That's a lot of Saturnian energy on the two planets representing his mind, the logical mind as well as this emotional mind. So this is somebody who is kind of a depressive, anxious type, and that's maybe why, um, he uh, stayed to himself for the most part. So with this Jupiter, Saturn, Moon combination in the second house, I don't think he actually spoke very much. Um, but he sort of like Houdini brought a lot of physicality to his oral speech. So he did do things like he wrote poetry. And when you have a Moon Jupiter combination in the second house, you can get poetry that way. But with the Saturn there, it's like written poetry. It's not like he's not the kind of guy who's going to get on stage and speak, I don't think, if he can avoid it. Especially when you see this Saturn is aspecting his fifth house where Saturn's debilitated. So he's going to be less of a performance artist than Houdini was for sure. Um, but he's also going to express his emotions through physical means, like literally Saturn can be Earth. So all the sculptures that he did. And then the Saturn aspecting into its own sign of the second house, that's going to be a lot of money coming his way. Third house, the Lord there is a Swa Saturn. And he's got Mercury there, Moon there, and the Moon is bhavat, bhavam. So again, this kind of deep philosophy thinking pattern that he has is he's gonna bring a lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of idealism, all of his thoughts and thinking about, death and transformation, all these sorts of things. His sculptures were beautiful and they were deep and they were moving, but like some of them were like tragic and sad. It's not like he was doing whimsical pieces. That's not really his vibe. Um, so he was expressing his mind and emotions through his hands. So that was sort of similar to Harry Houdini, using earth, a long, tedious process. I mean, this, just, banging out the marble, banging out the stone, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, how long did that take? And also how much did that, affect his arms? Like, that's the third house is, chronic illness with his arms and neck and hands and stuff like that from just pounding. Because he lived till he was almost 89, and apparently he was like still carving statues a few weeks up to his death or something like that. I mean, almost 90. Okay, let's shave down even like 10 years because he started, yeah, shave it down even 10 or even 70 years of banging, his hands and arms and, his body on stone to make these beautiful sculptures. I mean, that's like, good luck, not having, arthritis and, all other problems with your hands and your arms and stuff. So, but all of his emotions and all of his heaviness in his mind, he brought to his work, and that's what made it so deep and beautiful, was a sort of shadowy, it's almost like a more of a shadowy type art rather than like, again, upbeat and, fun and exciting the way that at least part of Houdini's work was, right? It's sort of like you can just imagine with Harry Houdini, he like comes out of the milk can and everybody's like, "Woo," and cheering and stuff. I mean, and applauding and happy, like, "Oh, I survived the milk can." But I mean, I don't think Michelangelo got that sort of reaction. I mean, people were moved in a deep way, I think, through his work, but not in a very different way than Houdini's work. Yeah, even though they both have strong third houses. This also gives this kind of energy with Saturn in the third house. It gives an artisan type energy. The fourth house is pretty massive. The Lord is this debilitated Jupiter. And then you have Combus Mars and Purva Bhadrapada. And then you have Sun and Uttar Bhadrapada. And then you have Ketu and Revati. So, well, the fourth house represents Earth. It represents the underground. Ketu brings an unusual energy. Mars is land, which fourth house is also property. But all these malefics create what's called a kuhu yoga. That's a bhava yoga, where it's like difficulty with mother, education. Like he dropped out of school to pursue the arts, and the son is the lord of the ninth house of gurus. So he was basically under his education was through apprenticeship, yeah, through teachers rather than a system. This also creates a Pravraja yoga, sort of life focus. So again, he started off Rahu, Jupiter, uh, Saturn. Yeah, so this could literally be with this Mars K2 combination, this very like explosive energy and underground property, like literally like excavations and stuff. Like he needed to excavate, stone from the ground to carve it. So on that scale, this was very important to him. The other thing is that, him taking, even if once he gets the slab of marble or whatever, and he starts, pounding on the stone and carving away at it, that's like a micro version of excavation, right? He's still, banging out stone and land for his art. So, yeah. What else? The fifth house, the fifth lord is this Asta Mars, and he's got Saturn debilitated here. This is not going to be a performance guy, but his stuff was on display. Like he's got Venus there in Ashwini, so he was a pioneer. Um, and then with the kind of Mars Saturn energy, when you get Saturn with Venus there, you could see like a sculptor. Somebody works with like material goods for their art. Um, and architecture, so sculpture architecture, pioneer there. The eighth house I mentioned, he's got the newish moon and Shatabisha, Saturn exalted. Jupiter's going to be exalted there. So actually, this is going to be a very interesting eighth house because that combination is going to bring like somebody's a gifted imagination. He's got the Jupiter moon combination there. So moon is going to be swa there and Jupiter is going to be exalted. Both of those planets represent intuition. So he's going to have a massive intuition, massive imagination, um, in regards to, but then he's got the Saturn there. So taking these heavy emotions and translating them into something beautiful physically. That's where his genius came from, his eighth house. And then he had the physical stamina to like pound on marble for whatever, 70 years or something. I mean, that's wild. I don't think I would last a day. And then the ninth house here, ninth lord sun. So not only, it's the ninth house not only represents guru, spiritual teacher and teacher of almost any kind, but religious organizations like the church, the Pope, who he was commissioned by the government. So you can see there that the sun was important for his art in terms of getting commissioned and gaining a lot of money through his life. The 10th house, we have Rahu and Chitra, aspected by Mars and Sun. So he's similarly going to be obsessed with work like Houdini was. But he's obsessed in kind of a different way because again we're getting Mars and K2 aspecting into Virgo, kind of like what we're having coming up for us this month. Somebody who's obsessed with working with the land and structures is, in unusual ways. Yeah, I mean, sculpting and all the amazing works and stuff he did. I mean, that's an unusual career. So, yeah, obsessed with work, this one. And then the 11th house, he's got Venus aspecting its own sign. So, money coming in for this guy. Also, the 11th house, again, clubs, groups, and societies. He's going to have very powerful artistic business friends. So, which is helpful for his career. So, yeah, you can see like similarities with Houdini's chart and similarities to the current sky patterns and things that we're going to be experiencing. But like a very different vibe. You can see that Michelangelo's chart is much more like deep and thoughtful and slow moving, where Houdini's chart was just more like exciting and like kind of adrenaline pumping kind of a chart. So you can compare and contrast their energies that way. Okay, so the moon this month, we've got a new moon in Aquarius Kumbha and Purva Bhadrapada, March 10th. This is a fixed air sign, Stira Vayu, and it's a neutral sign for the moon. It's conjoined with a Swakamba Saturn, Sun, Venus. Just as a general vibe, I haven't looked into detail about this, but just from this, there's going to be difficulty with relationships, women, the arts, and the kind of philosophies around that, is what I'm seeing here. Also, compassion, emotions, that sort of thing. So again, you can kind of see that we're bringing a lot of that into with Mercury being in Pisces, and then Moon and Venus being dominated by Mars and Saturn. Like that's a lot of tossing about emotion wise. So the 25th of March, we have that lunar eclipse is going on in Virgo, Kanya, and Hasta. It's a dual earth sign, Josepha Baba Prithvi. It's a friend sign for the moon. You're going to have Mercury, this kind of Mercury coming from Pisces, which should bring a little bit of strength to Virgo because Mercury will be in its own sign. But you also have aspect by Mars. So I would see, when you've got Moon and Mercury, Mars, Sun on the Rahu Ketu axis, or influenced or involved. That's a lot of mental emotional confusion, like literally mind blowing, chaotic energy. So this one might be fairly tough, I think. There might be some protection because Mercury is in its own sign, but Mercury is Sunday. Mercury is actually shifting signs um, the same day. So Mercury's in the last degree. It's Mercury's going to be unstable that way, and then unstable because it's debilitated in Pisces, and Venus isn't there yet to help buoy it up. So yeah, this one might be a tough one. And I could see like somebody trying to find some sort of solid ground, literally or figuratively, after some kind of loss here. And then again, with all eclipses, for better or worse, it's all about expect the unexpected. I think I've mentioned, and sometimes sometimes it's actually a good, good unexpected result. It's not always bad or negative. But like I think I mentioned in the my eclipse video, that one of the things I've noticed leading up to the eclipse period, through it, and then a little bit after, is that almost every day I could write, like if I wrote a list every day, I would be like something would happen that would just be like just strange or unusual. Um, like out of the ordinary. Uh And it doesn't have to be a big thing, like, the thing is, usually that only starts up for me, or I start sensing that energy about a week before the first eclipse. But I'm already sensing it, like even last week, so a month before this eclipse. So I'm just feeling like maybe this is going to be a fairly big one, and also what I'm seeing from the charts here. Um, like the other day, I was just walking, and I was going across the street, and this old-fashioned car was like driving by, but it was like, even for an old-fashioned car, it was like a strange car. Like it was super low to the ground. It was almost like driving a box or something like that. And then there were a couple of dogs, and I don't know. It was just like I don't think I've ever seen a car like that before, and definitely not driving on the road, functional. So. I was just like, okay, that was odd. So when I started thinking, and I was like, oh, well, eclipses are coming up. I guess I'm just surprised. And maybe, again, expect the unexpected. So even my expectations of the unexpected are shifting because of the eclipses. But I was like, oh, it's unusual that I'm feeling the energy this far forward of the eclipses. And then again, you might be feeling other things like just getting more intuitive insights. Um, dreaming, all that, like the veil between the spiritual and the physical worlds tends to thin during this time. So there can be a lot of psychic energy, for good or bad, happening at this time. So yeah, just It's usually a time to just slow down and go inward and do spiritual practices for the most part. But if you want more information, I would check out the eclipse video. But I will be doing separate videos on both the new moon on the 10th and then the lunar eclipse. I'll be going into a lot of detail on those separately beyond this video. So wait for those. They'll be coming out soon. Then we have our slow moving planets: Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, Rahu, Ketu. So these are going to be fairly active this month because of everything that's going on. So March 4th, K2 moves to Hasta, it just did. So we're going to get more of this grabby, hands-on energy um, uh, with K2. K2 before was in Chitra, which was more about structure and architecture. This is going to be more involved, a K2 energy. So building unusual structures, destroying structures, that could be the case. Gaining and losing control, being obsessed about gaining and losing control. These are the sorts of things that can be going on. March 6th, K2 is aspected by Mars. And K2 also aspects 5 and 9 away. So we're going to get a lot of K2 energy generally in the world. And then with this K2 Mars mashup, that can be a massive explosive type of energy, which again is being translated into Capricorn and Taurus. So Virgo, Capricorn, Taurus, these are all earth signs. So there's going to be some very physical representation of this energy on the planet. 19th of March, Mercury or Mars crosses Rahu. No, sorry. Mercury crosses Rahu. See, confusion. See, that's Rahu Ketu. Illusion, delusion, confusion. Mercury going debilitated soon, and then Mercury's going to go retrograde. So I'm like, I already started rolling my eyes. Like, we'll see how these new, these upcoming videos on astrology go. Oh, yeah. So it's usually harder for me to actually create a video during this time, the sort of time with the eclipses and Mercury and all that being challenged. But doing my best here. But Mercury crossing Rahu, so confusion about direction, ambitions, business, friends, travel, communication, all the above. Maybe some of it, maybe all of it. 20 to 22nd of March, planetary war between Venus and Saturn. So troubles with love versus tradition, could be loss of loved ones. This could be a creative block for sure. 23rd to 25th of March, Mars direct aspect on K2. So we're going to have a retaliation here of some kind, more explosive energy. And this is happening right leading up to and in the middle of this lunar eclipse in Virgo Hasta. So I think this eclipse might also bring energy of like confusion about what to keep and what to let go of. What's a priority and what's time to, just we're done with this. It's not serving us moving forward. Be again grabbing of foreign lands with very exact precision, tactical approach. Venus is in war with the SWA Saturn, so Saturn is fairly strong. And then the SWA Saturn aspects Jupiter. So both the benefics are, under the influence of this massive Saturn. So the benefics are out of the picture for this lunar eclipse, which is perhaps unfortunate. But luckily, again, right after this, within a few days, Venus is moving into Pisces. So Venus will be bringing some energy to Pisces and Virgo to help out. And at least Venus will potentially be there for the second eclipse coming up early in April. But Venus is debilitated in Virgo. So I don't know how much, better than nothing. But how much good it's going to do in Virgo remains to be seen. So then the 26th of March. Oh, finally, when Mercury leaves Pisces, they're also going to end this KT59 aspecting business. So there's going to be a moment of reprieve, but then remember, Mercury is going retrograde at the end of the month, or April 1st. So, we're going to get a redo on all of this, hopefully with better energy, because at least Venus will be in the mix and out of the influence of Saturn. We've got more planets in Jupiter as opposed to Saturn leading up to the eclipses. So those are the slow-moving planets. And then I got one more chart for you. So this is the chart of Alexander Graham Bell. And he's another March baby here. He was born on March 3rd, 1847. And it was weird. It was really weird because I was sort of scrambling at the last minute to find charts. And I don't know, for some reason I was having, usually I have some charts that in my database that, match the sky pattern, but I was like, really having to look this time. And it happened to be on March 3rd, his birthday, when I found his chart. The other thing that was really weird, you know, eh, was that apparently on March 3rd, 1876 is when he got his patent for the telephone in the United States. And I was just like, wow, that's like wild, man. It was almost like, is Alexander Bell like, his spirit communicating with me or something? Like, read my chart, read my chart. I don't know. It was very strange. That did not, so that did not go unnoticed. And again, that might be the kind of weird, unusual kind of psychic spiritual energy that might be popping up during this eclipse time coming up, as I mentioned. So, anyway, he was born on March 3rd, 1847, 7 a.m. And apparently this is with a birth chart. But again, I've seen a lot of, official birth charts that they don't give an exact minute. So I don't know if this is an exact birth time. But anyway, that's what's known about him is 7 a.m. He was born in Edinburgh, UK, Scotland. So this may not be an exact birth time for him. And even if it's not, we can still use it because it's still his sun is rising here, so it's still a Surya Lugna. We can still use it. So, but assuming that this is a 7 a.m. time, and again, the chart looks pretty good. I do think this is the right Lugna for him. But his Lugna Nakshatra Purva Bhadrapada. So we've been talking about that destructive energy. It's kind of funny because again, all three of these charts, and these are like famous people who like Houdini, for example. I mean, there's still like who is it? Dua Lipa, that dance music artist who's kind of famous at the moment. She just wrote a dance song, a club song about Houdini. You know, he's like still alive and well on the dance floor. He probably would get a kick out of that. Actually, somebody writing a dance club song about him. That's hilarious. But anyway, you can see like all three of these people, like Mula, Purvavadrapada. I mean, there's a lot of heavy energies here. But part of what I'm hoping you get from these charts is that there can be a lot of good that comes out of these heavy moments. So, hold on to hope. you know, even if things may at different times seem really dark. Beautiful things can come from that. So, um, yeah, try to remember that if you can. So anyway, Purva Bhadrapada, a lot of destructive energy here. Which you can see, he was a very disruptive person. I mean, just his invention of the telephone disrupted like all kinds of businesses and ways of communicating, travel, all this kind of stuff. So the moon nakshatra is an Uttara Falguni. We saw that nakshatra in Houdini's chart. So there was enjoyment with purpose for him. He definitely has a lighter. He was sort of like a mix, I think, between his energy was like kind of a mix between Houdini in terms of the enjoyment, lightness part, and then the depth of Michelangelo. His Birchasha was Sun, Saturn, Saturn. So look at that. All his Lugna. I mean, wow. Look at this Lugna. It's like crazy. Swa, Saturn. So he's also got a Shasha Yoga here with Sun. I don't know. Saturn might be combust. I don't know. I don't remember the degree, and I can't see it because there's a yellow line over it. So if the sun is at 2023, then Saturn is combust. Did I write it up here? Yes, Saturn is combust. So you're not going to see the Saturn for him, but he's going to have this massive internal NASA scientist part of him that's going to bring him power and fame and success. You're just going to see the sun here. So he's going to be a master of ideas, is what he's going to be. The king of ideas. You can kind of think about it that way. He was born Sun, Saturn, Saturn, and then the Shah sequence for him was Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury. He also lived a very long time. And you can see here, so Sun, we're already getting like president master here. And then Moon Mars, this is going to bring him independent energy. And then Rahu, you know, Rahu Jupiter, this is going to be explosion, ambition. Saturn Mercury, things are going to get a little bit quieter, but like technical. And and then the Saturn is really going to go crazy because I think when he first invented the telephone, it's not like he got famous and rich overnight. It took a while for it to kind of catch on, but just imagine, yeah, he's probably laughing from up in the clouds today at like what he did and how it's like you can't, that's the first thing you do is reach for your phone now. Can you imagine? Like, what was it, 100 and what was it, not 200 years ago, but 180 years ago? It didn't exist. What a different existence it was for people. Anyway, so, and then when he got his patent for the phone, he was running Rahu, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. So Rahu is down here in the eighth house of research. Saturn is, again, Shasha Yoga here. That's going to be activated. Fame, power, and all that. And then the other thing that's interesting is Jupiter and Mars, which both aspects or are part of influence his second house of oral communication. I mean, look at this massive house, second house for this guy. He's kind of got like this kind of like what Houdini had. He had like, so he's got a parivartana between Jupiter and Venus this time, but he's still got Venus, Mercury, Jupiter in Pisces. So Jupiter's going to be suave, Venus is going to be exalted. Mercury zipping through here, and he's got Mercury and Purva Bhadrapada again. So again, he's all about like busting up ideas. Making the impossible possible here in terms of oral communication. And he actually, I didn't know all of his background, so I'll get into that a little bit. But and then you have Mars here, coming from the 11th house of income, but also clubs, groups, societies. And then you've also got like Moon on this. He's got, was it Mars on how many? He's got K2 Venus, Mercury in the second house. He's got Jupiter in there by parivartana. He's got Mars in there by aspect. So he's got 6 planets in the second house. I mean, that's nuts, that's wild how much energy is going on there. Anyway, let's start at the top and go through Lugna, Aquarius, Kumbha, fixed air sign, Stira Vayu, Lugnatia, Swa, Kumbha, Saturn, Shatabisha. I mean, even though he actually came from a background where he studied like biology and phonetics and acoustics and stuff like that, he didn't actually make it that far in school. He did study some in college, but then he dropped out to get, because he got lost in his research. Because then he started his Rahu period when kind of in his usual education years, so that kind of took him off course or whatever towards just work and research. But yeah, because you have again the first lord in the first house, that's also bhavat bhavam. This is somebody who's constantly reinventing themselves, constantly redoing and upgrading themselves and outdoing themselves. Yeah. Sun is in Purva Bhadrapada. So yeah, that's like somebody who's always fixing and healing things, improving self and ideas, blowing up old paradigms. I mean, like, you don't necessarily think about that with Alexander Bell, but that's essentially what he did in the world. Um, I think I mentioned most of this. So he's a Shasha Yoga with the Saturn in its own sign. He has a Saraswati Yoga with Venus and Mercury and Jupiter where they are. That's education, creativity. He's got this Pravraja Yoga with K2 Venus Mercury in the second house. That's life focus. He's got a Kala Sarpa Yoga with Rahu and K2. Ambition. So power, creativity, education, life focus, ambition. And then the other thing, he was definitely a wild card oddball type because he's actually got Rahu and Ketu 5-9 aspects of both. So he's got Rahu and Ketu all over his chart. This guy, you know. Um, then his second house, this massive second house, is pretty crazy. Second lord is Jupiter and Rohini. So building speech, beauty and speech, and then you have this Jupiter in the fourth house of education. That's where he did study biology, which can be Jupiter. But then with the second house, his whole family, I think he was like a fourth generation acoustics and speech pathology type person. So it just ran in the family, which again, Jupiter in the fourth house, that's family lineage. Um, and I think he came from a pretty well-to-do and nice family because he's got Jupiter and Venus both in his fourth house of family line and then the second house of family. So I think his family was all, above board and supportive and for the most part. Um, they're pretty nice placements, as opposed to like the Kuhu yoga that Michelangelo had when he had, what is it, Mars, K2, and Sun in the fourth house. I mean, and he lost his mother at the age of 6. I mean, so what else? Oh, that's also important with this the Jupiter actually is that his mother and his wife were both deaf. So actually, just even having a deaf mother influenced his interest in speech and helping people. That's why he started with the telephone. So he actually started with trying to create hearing devices and communication devices for people who couldn't hear and speak. And then the telephone came out of that. So yeah. Which I didn't know about, which was actually pretty cool, actually, I thought. So yeah. So home, happiness, education, that's all gonna wrap into family lineage, all wraps into the second house of oral communication and his focus there. K2 Revati, that's going to be like, the ability to speak with people across the world. Um, he's going to be a gifted speaker. He's going to be multilingual. I don't know how many languages he spoke, talking to people long distances. And also this technical part with the Mars and the K2, again, that disruptive energy, kind of like, we're going to have with Mars and K2 in Virgo. Now we're having it in Mars and K2 in Pisces. So it's going to be more emotional because again, if all of a sudden he's creating devices where people can communicate, where there was that wall, capability wall, and he can break down those barriers and people can start talking to people across the world like their family and stuff. I mean, that's going to be a very emotional thing. Um, Business and idea disruptor with that Mercury and Purva Bhadrapada, and yeah, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. I mean, Jupiter, in its own sign through the parivartana, that's a lot of dough, coming his way. Then the fourth house, I've already basically been talking about that. So biology, arts, research disrupted. The research disrupted because the Rahu aspects the fourth house. And so when he moved into the Rahu period, that's when he like dropped out of school and just followed his research to create these devices and stuff like that. So even though he has a pretty strong fourth house and he had the opportunity for education, he had some education, when the planet shifted and then he went into Rahu period, which is like this deep research energy for him, it just his energy and focus and interest shifted. And if I remember for him, was it his chart? I don't know if it was his chart or not. I forget whose chart it was. I think it might have been his chart where I think the 10th house, I forget which chart it was. One of these guys' charts that I'm doing today, like their Dasha sequence, whether like if it was him, if it was Alexander Graham Bell, like Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, like the first 4 or 5 planets were all swa in the 10th house of career and fame. you know? So it's just like, and I've seen that with other people's charts where they had, if you just looked at their natal chart, they had opportunity for education, but when their career subchart Amsha took off, during their education years, they just usually dropped out of school and went with the, career and money and stuff like that. I think Celine Dion's chart, when I looked at her chart, she was like that too, because she had, I think, good placements for her fourth house. But then her D10 was just crazy when she was young. So she was singing and performing when she was almost in diapers, I think, like literally. And then I think she went through high school and then just was like, I don't know if she got any college or not, but She went on to like Eurovision when she was like 18. It's like her, her career like took off like gangbusters when she was very young. So she didn't get an education for that reason because the planets that were active for her took her away from education. Not that she didn't have the ability to or opportunity, but the planets do what the planets do, right? So then the fifth house here, what do we have? We have Mars aspecting here. And then and the Lord here is Mercury with these benefics, Venus. I mean, this is going to be a lot of public speaking, um, and also a lot of like positive, innovative intellect in terms of the way his mind works. 'Cause he was constantly like teaching and doing demonstrations of his, the gizmos he was devising and stuff like that. Um, and also even before that, like his father was doing demonstrations and informing people about different things that they could use if they had any difficulty communicating because of like things like deafness or something like that. Um, so yeah, and then the sixth house here, he's got the Lord is the moon, uh, aspected by K2, Jupiter. Oh, Jupiter's gonna be exalted here. There's gonna be a debilitated Mars. Um, there's going to be quite a few enemies, critics, competitors. That was all true. And this is going to be all of his legal patents for technology. The Jupiter and Mars here, that's law. And the sixth house is law, legal issues. And I don't know how many patents he had. But actually, I was reading the end of his biography. He had a bunch of honorary degrees. And what I thought was funny was most of them were honorary degrees in law. They weren't like honorary degrees in engineering or, I don't know, medicine or something like that. They were, I think most of them, majority of them were law degrees because of all of his patent stuff that he was doing. So that was kind of funny. And apparently he never lost a legal battle. And so maybe just that, like his winning streak with legal patent stuff, maybe that's what got him the, honorary degrees in law. I mean, that's a pretty good track record, right? So anyway, that's the sixth house. Seventh house Lord is the sun. So sun is going to aspect its own house, and it's going to create a bhavat bhavam for the seventh house, which means many relationships, also many businesses, and I would assume products from this. Which, with all the things he did, all the products, all the demonstrations, all the teaching, because he was teaching, like I think mostly deaf students, like in Boston and other places. I mean, it was just like and just with the telephone, I mean, he's like then all of a sudden he had people who could call him from the other side of the world, right? So, yeah, that's pretty wild. Then the eighth house sort of talked about Mercury aspects its own sign. That's going to make it strong. And then he's Rahu here, a very alternative mindset. The moon is here. It's going to be a lot of imagination as well as a lot of meticulous thinking because, meticulous practical thinking because we're talking about Virgo here. So he's not only a big picture, like imaginative type, like he's not just the big, like the idea creator, but he's somebody who can actually like, you know, physically, create the device himself, which is like amazing. So wild imagination, alternative psychology, deep research bent about building things. Because again, Virgo's a practical planet. And then he's got the Venus, K2, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter aspecting here. That's a lot of energy in the eighth house. Um, then the 10th house here, 10th house Lord is Mars and some Purva Shada, aspected by K2 Swasan. So kind of like Houdini, this is not somebody who's likely to have a 9 to 5 job because you have all these like malefics, um, K2 and Saturn on the 10th house. That's not going to work out very well. Mars is doing what Mars is doing. So anyway, this is Alexander Graham Bell. Pretty amazing again, just even for me with the March 3rd. I probably will never forget his birthday now. But again, another example of how some of the current sky patterns could potentially play out. So hopefully that gives some hope and hopefully maybe a breath of relief and for the eclipses coming up. All right, so if you like to be your own astrologer, you might take one of these storylines, and again, we're kind of all across the board of the horoscope this month because of all the movement. But the main the constellations are Capricorn, Makara, Aquarius, Kumbha, Pisces, Mina, and Virgo, Tula. So you can maybe pick one of these houses you're interested in, and if you're not familiar with the symbolism already, figure out which house the constellation is in. You can see the basic chart here, first house, second house. This is a North Indian style chart. So if you count backwards from the top diamond there to get your house numbers. So like let's say Aquarius for you, or let's take the last chart we looked at. So Alexander Graham Bell, he had Pisces in the second house, right? So a second house you can see here, and I've just had the very basic symbolism of the houses here. If you want more, there's a lot more detail in my individual videos on the houses, but you can see here, second house, family, speech, wealth, food, and drink. So three of the four I talked about, family involved with, four generations of speech pathology type people, family, well educated, and also I would say very altruistic because, they could have spent a lot of time, energy, money, I don't know, building skyscrapers, which has its own utility for sure, but they're trying to create devices so that primarily deaf people can communicate and not be isolated. I mean, that's a pretty heart-centered altruistic type of thing because they're spending all this time and money. They don't know if they're actually going to create anything that's going to make any money. But, not only did they help, potentially deaf people and stuff, but all of us, right? I mean, how much communicate? I mean, we can't get away from communication now. I mean, he would probably be like, astounded by how his devices have morphed and evolved over the years. And our lives as well. But yeah, and then wealth, I mean, because again, he had Jupiter in its own sign. So, pick your favorite constellation, figure out which house it's in, and then you can match it up. And that'll give you a little bit more personal interpretation of how these general energies are going to be playing out for you. Yeah, you can start mixing and matching that way. And then the second slide here, these are the other houses. So on the previous slide, I had the 1-7 axis, 2-8 axis, 3-9 axis. And then here I've got the other, so 4-10, 5-11, 6-12. So you can take a look at these slides for very basic symbolism of houses, but if you really want more, I would go to the Bhava's houses playlist and actually look at the individual videos. Okie doke. So there you have it. Planetary transits for this month, March, and all the exciting stuff. Something exciting is gonna be happening, whether it's more on the positive side or negative side. Again, I think depends on the chart and the placements for each individual. But slow your roll, take your time, do your best. That's all what any of us can do. And if you want some more, again, more information on eclipses and stuff like that. Again, it's not all bad, as you can see from the charts I went through today. But definitely some surprises in store. So anyway, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concept playlist. They can all be found there. I do individual birth chart readings on Zoom. If you're interested, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. I don't actually typically do birth chart readings around eclipses because the energy is usually fairly chaotic. And yeah, so if you're interested in a birth chart reading, most likely that will happen after the eclipses. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there also if that's of interest to you. But as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, useful, and helpful to you as you navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So take care, and until the next one, namaste.